is not the night we
Marvel's Zombies is finally here, and I will say that my only disappointment is that it's not longer. It was an absolutely fantastic series. 4 episodes was not enough, but it was bloody, it was gory, it was like a horror zombie movie, and it was absolutely amazing. Like, they honestly could have just made a Marvel Zombies movie, pieced the episodes together, and not released 4 different episodes at a time. But still, nonetheless, absolutely fantastic, really enjoyed it, still wish there was more. But in this video, what we're going to be doing is going over the Easter eggs and references, talking about the ending, and all the different things that connected to the MCU. So first off, if you haven't seen Marvel Zombies in a while, it started with Marvel What If Zombies, which had Hulk get blasted to Earth like in Infinity War, come across zombies who had taken over the planet because of the fact that Janet Van Dyne had turned into a zombie in the quantum realm, and when Hank Pym went there, he got turned into one as well, came to Earth, they infected the Avengers in San Francisco, and the apocalypse started. With our heroes trying to survive the apocalypse, Vision holding a Black Panther hostage to feed zombie Scarlet Witch, them coming together and thinking that Stone could save everyone, Vision sacrificing himself, being brought to Wakanda after the Hulk defended them by taking on Scarlet Witch, and then Spider-Man, Black Panther, and Scott Lang running into zombie Thanos and Wakanda, which led us to the events of this series, which honestly is pretty dope. I love that they continued this because I knew that the Zombies What If episode was just not enough and we needed more after that, so I'm glad that they continued it in some way. Which then had us starting off with Kate Bishop, Kamala Khan, and Riri Williams all together surviving, and kind of a tease for the Young Avengers and the Champions, which will eventually be coming to the MCU. Because we know from the Marvels that Kamala Khan is currently recruiting people to be in the Young Avengers, because we saw her recruiting Kate Bishop and referencing Cassie Lang. Now, the way this starts off is with our heroes trying to survive in the apocalyptic world, and somehow they all came together. We see that Riri is using an Iron Man suit with a teddy bear head, and calls back that she found it on a headless Tony Stark, which is a reference to Marvel Zombies where Hope blew up Tony Stark's head. She also calls it Friday because the AI Tony Stark was using was named Friday, and it's an AI that he has in the comics. We see Kamala Khan with her light-based powers where she got her bangle in this universe early and uses that to protect herself. Riri's armor resembles her Mark 1 armor to an extent because she didn't fully complete building it yet, and we first saw that Mark 1 armor during Black Panther Wakanda Forever, and we see that Kate Bishop is wearing her Hawkeye uniform, even though she would not have gotten that uniform yet because the Hawkeye series hasn't happened. She is wearing the exact same one she got. Also, Hawkeye is also wearing a suit from that series as well. Hawkeye is currently watching over that area as he fights and takes them on, shooting trick arrows at them, launching them out, which was a pretty cool move. And we also get to see that these characters are going to Grand Central Station, the same station that we saw during Avengers where they had their final battle. A Quinjet crashes down and has a device that's shrunken within the zombie that's within it, which at first I thought was sent by Black Panther, Spider-Man, based on how they were the ones that last had a Quinjet when they went to Wakanda. However, I saw someone mention this might be Eric Selvig based on the hair and what they look like. I'm not entirely sure, they didn't confirm this, so let me know what you think in the comments down below. So they reference S.H.I.E.L.D., which means S.H.I.E.L.D. is somewhat still around after the events of Captain America Winter Soldier, them going back to the Bishop Manor, which is from the comics because Kate Bishop has a manor there. Riri also calls Kate getting killed by her favorite Avenger, which we know from the MCU that Kate Bishop's favorite Avenger is Hawkeye, and that's the reason why she became Hawkeye. So that starts them on their quest to go across the country to find the S.H.I.E.L.D. base in order to figure out what this device does and who it's trying to send a signal to. As they're driving through the desert, a bunch of storm activity happens, and we find out that's because Captain Marvel and Icarus are fighting. And in this, Icarus isn't zombified or anything because he's technically not human and he's like an android, so he can't be turned into a zombie. But he's fighting Captain Marvel, who is wearing her costume that we first saw during Captain Marvel, and she has somehow been zombified. We don't necessarily know who, and we can assume when the zombie outbreak started, Nick Fury had paged her like he did at the end of Infinity War. Now, because the Eternals are still trying to enact their plan to get Tiamat to spawn out of the Earth, this could be Icarus fighting Captain Marvel so that she could stop infecting humans because she is so powerful, she can do it so easily. So that could be the reason why he's fighting her. Otherwise, it doesn't really make sense that we have one random Eternal fighting a zombie. We do have Kate using that trick arrow, which just ends up being a party arrow and does absolutely nothing. And at the end of the day, this is where all the death starts. We lose Riri getting bitten, but she injects herself with something that might come around back at the last episode of the season, and then Kate gets blown up. Riri sends Friday to save Miss Marvel, so Miss Marvel can get out of there, but so far her friends die. Just like any zombie apocalypse show, bodies just slowly start dropping. However, we get the badass moment of Blade's Moon Knight showing up and saving Miss Marvel and taking her to the SHIELD facility because Khonshu was the one that told him to go save her. And we also find out that during their conversation that Mark Spector died during the original outbreak. So Mark Spector must have turned into a zombie and Khonshu left him to find a new host. This is where we end up to the SHIELD base and find out that Melina, Red Guardian, and Yelena are all there with their Black Widows, and Melina is taking control of the zombies like she has done her pigs, which we first saw in the Black Widow movie. On top of it, the reason that they're there at the SHIELD facility is because it's the same SHIELD facility that they infiltrated during Black Widow. We find out that the device they have is called the Nova Corps, which we first saw the Nova Corps during Guardians of the Galaxy. And Melina mentions that the Wakanda incident is what caused the little device to not be able to send a signal outside of Earth's atmosphere, meaning they have to go to space in order to send it. And the widows that they have at their base are the same ones we saw at the end of Black Widow that Natasha freed. However, their safety doesn't last because the zombies show up with Okoye and her army. That includes Abomination, Ghost, Captain America, and Hawkeye, which we see them attacking the base in this really cool, awesome horde scene with all the zombies trying to infiltrate it. Ghost takes down the Black Widow, so RIP them, and then Captain America makes his way into the facility and gets thrown by Abomination, having a fastball special, just like how Colossus throws the Wolverine during the X-Men comics. Then we get the cool matchup of Red Guardian versus Captain America, and Red Guardian talks about how he's always wanted to fight Captain America, and it's in his faith, just like how in Black Widow, he really wanted to fight Captain America. Red Guardian questions why Captain America is cut in half, which we first saw in Marvel's What If Zombies, where Bucky cuts Captain America in half with the shield. Which I will say, the only thing I was disappointed from the series was not seeing Bucky, because yes, we did see him get yeeted during What If Zombies, but we never really saw a body, so we don't know if he survived or not. My headcanon is that he survived. When Blade, Miss Marvel, and Yelena go down to stop the zombie horde from infiltrating, Yelena's using the electric batons that Natasha uses during the Avengers movies. But then we get the unfortunate scene of Melina sacrificing herself to save everyone, in this really good moment of her trying to control the zombies, but Wanda has more power over her and is able to take control of them back. Then we have Ghost taking on Blade, which was just a pretty cool fight of Blade messing stuff up, and it's still great to see Blade's first appearance in the MCU, which then that just commences their plan to get into space so that they can try to reach Nova Corps that could potentially have a cure to save the planet. Now, when it comes to episode 2, it starts off with a 5 years ago flashback, with Shang-Chi and Katie trying to survive the zombie apocalypse as it starts in San Francisco. Now, they are wearing their valet uniforms, which means they're still working before the events of Shang-Chi, and because this is a 5 years ago flashback, it is definitely showing that the What If Zombies was an Infinity War What If, so this means that this is the Endgame part of everything else, because similar things happened in the flashbacks that led from Infinity War to Endgame. Now, it's kind of crazy because we do see giant seagulls, giant ants, giant people, because the Pym particles have been released from Pym Labs. So just crazy to see giant stuff that wasn't just humans. So I like what they did here, just kind of giving us some crazier things going on. When Shang-Chi and Katie are trying to run away, Jimmy Woo saves them, who we first saw in Ant-Man and the Wasp. And then Shang-Chi shows off his skills as he takes on the zombies, showing his kung fu moves. And Katie reacts in a similar way like she did when Shang-Chi was fighting in the bus during the Shang-Chi movie. But that's when everything kind of goes to shit, where they're gonna die, and then Wenwu and Death Dealer show up to save his son. So like this really cool moment of Wenwu trying to be this father who saves his son. However, at the end of the day, having to sacrifice himself because Shang-Chi gets bitten, using the 10 rings to stop the infection. Then we see during the episode and the rest of them that he's wearing one of the 10 rings on him at all times to make sure that the infection does not go past his elbow. But then when it cuts back to 5 years later to the present day, we do get to see them driving through the desert in this kind of Mad Max homage scene. And it was pretty cool because it reminded me of Mad Max, of course, but it also kind of reminded me of Resident Evil 3. Because they are traveling through a desert with a bus to try to survive the zombies and the different apocalypse stuff going on, which this is what it kind of reminded me there. But then we had the Skrulls showing up, who we did see during Secret Invasion. We learned that they had been infiltrating Earth for years, which means that these Skrulls are the ones that have been surviving on Earth, either the good ones or the bad ones, who have just trying to been blending in or take over. But then they all get their asses kicked by Shang-Chi and Katie using the 10 rings together, Death Dealer doing some damage, and just a really overall fun scene of them fighting back in this Mad Max Fury Road kind of journey as they're trekking across the desert trying to get to this safe zone, which then leads us to the two groups that we first met in episode 1 and episode 2 to meet up together, and we find out that Baron Zemo and John Walker are running the Raft, and that is the safe zone. And the Raft is the giant prison that we see in the MCU where characters like the Avengers after Civil War were put, the Red Hulk after Captain America, Brave New World, and other characters like that were put away in there. Baron Zemo is also wearing the same suit that we saw during Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and John Walker has become more of his lackey than anything else. We see Jimmy Woo doing a magic trick like we saw in WandaVision, and Miss Marvel fills them in on their plan to save the world by going to New Asgard in order to get a spaceship to get to space to send out the signal. We find out that Namor's people have all been turned into zombies and have just been living in the ocean, and they're being controlled by Wanda Maximoff as well, which then leads to them getting the order to attack the raft so that they can kill the human. We get a shot of Namor on his throne like we saw during Black Panther Wakanda Forever, and then they go to attack the raft, which when the raft gets hit, Jimmy Woo says an iceberg, because that's a reference to Titanic and Titanic sinking because of an iceberg. But then Zemo's whole plan to keep these guys occupied is to send out the heroes to be food for them so that Namor does not attack them. However, that fails miserably because that leads to Namor infiltrating the raft, him getting captured in a Hulk containment cell, showing that the raft had a spot for the Hulk to contain him, just like how most of the prisons in Marvel Comics have somewhere where they can keep a Hulk-type creature. But then honestly, we get an absolutely badass, awesome scene of the heroes taking on the zombies inside the raft, and it's just a really cool choreographed fight scene. But a bunch of people die. Shang-Chi loses a bunch of his nameless characters, and Walker gets ripped in half just like Captain America. We find out that Wanda might be after the device that they have because Namor is trying to get it from Miss Marvel, which then ends up leading to this brutal scene of Miss Marvel blowing up his head, which was something I was not expecting. So overall, like a really cool scene, and then just led to another devastating one where Elena is actually the one that sacrifices herself in order to let her friends and her family escape from the raft. So just a sad moment to lose another character, an absolutely amazing scene when we had them fighting within it, and I just love the way they kind of portrayed some of this stuff. It felt like an apocalyptic show. Shit just kept going wrong one after another because you have super powered zombies that you have to deal with. But that was it for episode 2, and then episode 3 started off continuing where we left off with What If's Marvel Zombies, with Black Panther, Scott Lang, and Spider-Man going to Wakanda. Zombie Thanos actually destroys the Quinjet and starts fighting the three of them. But it turns out he couldn't actually use Infinity Stones right away because he was just a zombie, but as it slowly progressed and him using it more and more, he started to learn, which made it so he was probably a little bit easier to fight at first for the three of them, unlike the Avengers taking him on and absolutely getting their asses smacked during Infinity War. But that gives us the badass moment of Thor arriving with Rocket and Groot, just like how he does during Infinity War, to fight Thanos in this really badass moment. However, it did not last long because Thor made the same mistake and didn't go for the head and instead hit Thanos in the chest, which led to Thanos using the Power Stone to absolutely obliterate Groot and Rocket and then Thor flying. So RP Rocket and Groot, who disintegrated, which is a reference to Guardians of the Galaxy 1, where the Guardians grabbed the Power Stone and started disintegrating before they eventually were able to take down Ronan. We get a badass moment of Spider-Man throwing Stormbreaker, which seems to get disintegrated, and then Black Panther using the Soul Stone to fight back against Thanos, giving us this really cool moment of him taking blows, which then in turn sets off his vibranium suit that gives him more kinetic power to knock Thanos into the vibranium molten core in order to destroy him and the Infinity Stones. And when Black Panther started fighting, we did get this classic scene from those movies, which was a pretty awesome moment. With the Infinity Stones being destroyed, it sent off a wave of cosmic energy that started to take over the Earth, destroying everything in its path. But luckily, Spider-Man and Scott Lang were saved by the sorcerers of Kamar Taj, which we did get to see Rintrah, who we did see during Multiverse of Madness. And then back in present day, the group arrives in New Asgard, which they come face to face with Valkyrie as she's protecting it, wearing the same costume that she was wearing during Thor Love and Thunder. Khonshu reveals himself to her to show that a god is in her presence and to let him inside, which she ends up letting him inside because they have Khonshu with them, an actual god. And what we learn from Love and Thunder, that the gods have a council that they meet in, which Khonshu would have been there probably if he wasn't with Mark Spector Moon Knight. When they're going into it, they reference D&D based on how the hall looks like and just referencing cool Dungeons and Dragons. We see a statue of Odin, which is just a nice little point direction to Odin, of course. And we find out that Valkyrie and them came to Earth to find salvation, to survive, just like how they did after Ragnarok in the MCU. But however, in this universe, it was already zombified and Earth was just death. This is when we find out as well that Thor is actually alive, and he's just mellowing and being depressed, just like how he was during Endgame. However, unlike Endgame, he's not fat and playing video games. Instead, he's just being quiet and alone on his throne as the rest of the Asgardians feast, because it turns out Wanda has showed up, bringing them a feast, trying to get them to join her side, saying that she's actually used her chaos magic, reality manipulating powers to turn herself back human, and that she's no longer a zombie. which is completely untrue because it turns out she was actually feeding all the Asgardian zombies to turn them into zombies so that she can have a bigger army to take over the planet. Red Guardian was feasting with the Asgardians, so he also ate zombie flesh, but he didn't get turned right away like the rest of them. Instead, it actually took a little longer, and it was most likely because of the super soldier serum slowing the infection down before he was ultimately turned at the end. However, with the Asgardians turning into zombies, they gave us a bunch of deaths as well, and some gruesome scenes with Death Dealer saving Jimmy Woo and then getting killed by the Asgardians, and then Jimmy Woo dying as well. When the rest of the heroes are trying to escape, they run to Valkyrie's ship, which is the party ship that we saw from Sakaar that was the Grand Masters during Thor Ragnarok. While they're trying to fly away, Wanda's zombie stops them, but then Thor comes in to save the day and protect them and sacrifice himself to take on Wanda so the heroes have a chance to save Earth from this zombie virus. Even getting a cool moment of him saying that Kamala is now an Avenger, kind of leading more into Kamala making her own team of young Avengers in the main MCU. But that's when we get this group escaping to Earth and trying to alert the Nova Corps. However, it turns out that Nova Corps were already there, and they were blocking off their path because they condemned Earth to make sure that the infection could not leave the planet and couldn't go anywhere else, having the same formation as a shield like we saw during Guardians of the Galaxy. And the difference here with Nova Corps already being around is that we know during the main MCU timeline, Thanos destroys Xandar and the Nova Corps when he went to get the Power Stone. However, it seems in this universe he did not destroy Xandar and the Nova Corps, and they're still around. That does lead into episode 4, which then we have the Nova Corps trying to destroy the group to prevent the zombie infection from getting out into the universe, which in the comics Marvel Zombies, the infection does lead to other planets because the zombies go around the universe consuming everything. But then we get the chaotic moment of Shang-Chi pressing a bunch of buttons because he doesn't know what to press as Valkyrie tries to give them commands to help them escape, which just ends up with the ship stopping and them getting blown up by the Nova Corps, and then Miss Marvel saving them by crashing them down into Earth. While they're following, Valkyrie asks if it counts as dying in battle, because from Thor Love and Thunder, we know that if they die during battle, they'll go to Valhalla. Then they get saved by the sorcerers of Kamar-Taj, and Miss Marvel nerds out by meeting Spider-Man, which is a classic Miss Marvel thing, where she meets superheroes and nerds the hell out. We find out that the Infinity Stone energy actually was destroying the planet until the Hulk was able to contain the energy within himself. And they use runes to help him as well, because we know from Endgame when he snapped, it still messed him up. So in this universe, using magic and Hulk powers, they were able to contain the power within him. But that also shows that Wanda is going after the Hulk for round 2 in order to take the Infinity Stone energy for herself, which then has the Kamar-Taj sorcerers wanting the heroes to help them in one final stand to stop the zombies from overtaking the world. Which then just leads us to that all-out assault where we have the zombies versus the heroes. But at first, it leads with Wanda leading her army, an Abomination charging towards the Hulk and getting blasted by him, and Hulk using that Infinity Stone energy to take down the zombies. We have giant zombies with Pym particles flying Asgardian's ship, which we did see during Thor Love and Thunder. We then have Wanda dropping the raft over the Hulk, releasing all of the Talakoans onto him, trying to overwhelm him as he continues to fight back in this really awesome moment. We have bombardments of the Asgardians and blasts from their ships, and just this really epic moment of the Hulk trying to take them all on by himself until the heroes show up to save the day. Which then we have the Avengers theme start to playing as they arrive, as the only last heroes on Earth have come to protect the one holding the strongest energy. Which honestly, this was just a really cool fight. Seeing all the heroes use different moves, attacking the zombies, getting some brutal scenes like Miss Marvel cutting all the zombies' heads off with her powers, Spider-Man ripping off heads with his webs, and just getting an all-out war trying to fight them and take them down. We have Zombie Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne showing up again, the people who started it all during the Marvel's What If Zombies, and it just ends up with Valkyrie absolutely obliterating Janet by going inside her and slashing her head apart from within, and then Blade cutting Hank in half. So it's a really cool bloody fight overall, all up until Wanda tries to manipulate Kamala and her friends by trying to change their mind and using the people they care about to fight them. So we have Melina, Red Guardian, and Yelena showing up to fight with Miss Marvel, Hope going against Scott and Spider-Man, just like how we saw her during Marvel's What If Zombies, and then Death Dealer and Jimmy having their bodies used in order to fight Shang-Chi and Katie. Plus, when all this is going on, a bunch of red mist starts to take over the battlefield, just like how we saw during Multiverse of Madness, where Wanda killed Professor Xavier with that red mist as she snuck up behind him and snapped his neck. Then we find out that Thor had actually turned into a zombie, and he's able to summon Stormbreaker, who seemed to be obliterated a few episodes ago. So it's cool to see him fight against the Hulk because it's kind of a rematch after Thor Ragnarok. We get Valkyrie versus Okoye, which Valkyrie ends up losing, unfortunately. Blade gets obliterated by Thor, which was so unfortunate. But luckily, Hulk does defeat Thor. And he can say now that he's the strongest Avenger. However, that's just kind of where it all leads to where it all ends. Shang-Chi gets bitten. Rintrah gets absolutely stabbed to shit with a bunch of spears from the zombies. And Spider-Man almost gets eaten by Hope until the episode clearly ends. After Wanda ends up grabbing a hold of Hulk, taking the powers, and then Wanda convincing Kamala to grab onto her to save the day, that all their struggles aren't for waste and that they can reshape and save the world. Which then a huge blasts go off that seems to be reshaping the world like Wanda has done with her Hex during WandaVision, because we then see Kamala waking up in her bed. We have an Iron Man poster and a Black Widow poster, and that Black Widow poster is like the Black Widow movie poster. Kate and Riri are back, and Kamala gets to see her friends. They go to get boba, and then in the scene, we can see Kamala wearing her jacket that has a Black Widow symbol, an Avengers symbol, and a Hawkeye symbol, because at this point in time, she has not met Captain Marvel. She hasn't become that fangirl for her, so she's just a fangirl of the other Avengers. She sees Red Dagger, a love interest from the comics and the Miss Marvel TV show, and we get to see it cutting to Riri calling out for her, trying to get Miss Marvel to snap out of it, which is kind of like how we heard Jimmy Woo's voice during WandaVision trying to talk to Wanda in her Hex, which means that everything going on might be a Hex, that the world is actually surrounded by zombies, but Wanda is controlling a select few people to survive with these zombies as she gets to think that they're living this perfect life, and Wanda has no one trying to stop her from controlling the masses. But because Riri is there, that means that the thing she stuck herself when after episode 1, it could mean that she actually created a cure to stop the zombie infection, which means that this could have set up a sequel as well. At first, I thought she just reshaped the world and made people human again and just got rid of the zombie virus, but it makes a lot more sense that Wanda took the power to reshape the world for her zombie friends and that the zombies could survive without the humans interacting and trying to stop them. But the way they set this up with Riri trying to snap Miss Marvel out of it, it definitely makes me think that they are setting up a sequel. They said this was a limited series, but at the end of the day, they could make a second season or make something else come out of this that ties into the bigger story at play. And maybe now there's only so many people alive, Miss Marvel will have to break out of it with Riri Williams, find other heroes like the other heroes we've seen throughout the MCU, like She-Hulk and the Eternals, possibly Spider-Man if he didn't end up dying, same with Scott Lang if he didn't end up dying, characters that might have survived that we didn't actually explicitly see their death. They might end up having a chance to survive at the end of the day and come back to try to stop zombie Scarlet Witch from ruling over the planet, and they could save the world. But we will see. There's a lot to come out of this. It was an absolutely fantastic 4-episode series. Again, 4 episodes wasn't enough. I think they definitely needed a lot more, but it was still cool nonetheless. I also kind of wish they did week to week rather than dropping each episode at a time so we could theorize and talk about more things about the episodes and try to figure out what was going to happen next and like have more conversation about it rather than it coming out and then being done with it. But let me know. What did you think of Marvel's Zombies? Did you see any other Easter eggs and references that I might have missed that you want to talk about in the comments down below? And what did you think of this series overall? Thanks for watching. If you like this video, hit the like and the subscribe button. It helps out the channel a lot. And you get to stay up to date with my DC, my Marvel, and my anime videos. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you later when it's time to watch another Marvel or DC project.